For the last 20 years, I've driven hundreds of thousands of miles to uncover the history of these islands. But now it's time to do something different. I'm going to turn the engine off and leave the car behind. Instead, I'm going to walk. My walks will uncover the richest history from our finest landscapes in a way that's only possible on foot. This time, I'm covering a 60-mile stretch of the coast of Dorset. I'm here to uncover evidence of a time when this sleepy county of rolling hills and winding lanes was utterly transformed. Because when World War II broke out and the threat of a Nazi invasion was only too real, this was frontline Britain. Dorset's coastline boasts some stunning scenery. Lofty limestone cliffs overlook shallow bays and long beaches. A coastal path and a network of inland byways make this a paradise for walkers. I've planned a 4-day walk that takes in the best this coast has to offer. I'm starting outside the village of Abbotsbury, on the unique 18-mile Chesil Beach. I'll explore the extraordinary harbours of Weymouth and Portland, and marvel at the strange geology of places like Durdle Door. I'll be watching my step as I cross the firing ranges of Lulworth, and I'll head for Studland Bay and Swanage. Both my final destinations had vital and secret roles to play in the run-up to D-Day, and make a fitting end to my journey. Hidden everywhere is a rich history of defiance and courage exhibited during the most destructive war the world has ever known. This is a great story from 1940, when everyone thought the Germans were about to invade, through to 1944 and the D-Day landings. It's a series of events that have left an indelible mark in Dorset, and nowhere more so than here on Chesil Beach. The beach was created by tidal currents that deposited shingle to form the Long Bar, which stretches from West Bay to Portland Bill. Walking along this beach, it's a bit like a workout in the gym. Every step of the way you're fighting these pebbles, which are in fact unique. In fact, they're so unique that if you remove a single one of them, you could be in big trouble. This is a World Heritage Site and a site of special scientific interest, so I'll be leaving the shingle right here. But not so long ago, the beach attracted interest of a very different kind. In May 1940, the Germans invaded France, conquering the entire country in just 6 weeks. British forces had to be evacuated from Dunkirk, and everyone expected a Nazi invasion of Britain within weeks. The long open stretches of Chesil Beach were a prime target for a German invasion. So engineers spent the summer of 1940 working furiously to erect defences here. What are these things, John?
Anti-tank blocks.
When were they built?
August 1940.
How do these things work?
It's simply a large chunk of concrete, and the tank can't climb over it. It can't come through the gaps here, so it has to stop.
The blocks are cleverly positioned. Any vehicle landing between here and Portland is prevented from advancing inland by the lagoon behind the beach. So these dragon's teeth effectively block the only exit from a 10-mile stretch of shingle. And they weren't the only defences that were put in place.
There's pillboxes behind us. There's medium machine gun trenches to our right, and there's an anti-tank ditch running all along the bottom of the beach.
The defences were designed to deter infantry as well as vehicle landings. So this would have been for machine guns?
Yes, indeed.
What would it have looked like?
Be no pebbles in here, so you have a trench here and here. There's a platform here. The machine gun would have sat around here, so as low as possible.
How many people in here?
There would have been 3 people.
How far would they have been able to defend?
As far as the eye can see, the horizon of the beach out to across the fields, roughly 90 degrees.
The defences here aren't just on the coast. My path takes me past some of the 300 pillboxes that were built right across Dorset in 1940. Young soldiers would have spent days and nights in places like this, anxiously scanning the sea for the enemy. It's almost unimaginable the amount of fear people must have gone through, especially round here. And I can't imagine a few bits of concrete helping much. I mean, look at this pillbox. The thing that strikes me about it is how small it is. Can't imagine that would have stopped an invasion, can you? Luckily, it didn't have to. I'm heading east towards Weymouth and Portland with their famous harbours, and my route brings me down to the lagoon behind Chesil Beach. Called the Fleet, it gets its name from the Saxon word fliot, meaning shallow waterway. It was created at the end of the Ice Age, when rising sea levels flooded the area behind Chesil's Shingle Bar. Now twitchers flock here for its array of bird life, although in Abbotsbury it's dominated by one breed, the swan. There's been a swannery here since medieval times, when local Benedictine monks set one up to farm the swans for their dinner table. But I haven't come here to admire the wildlife. I've come to reveal the fleet's own wartime story. In late 1942, this stretch of water was turned into a test ground for one of the most innovative weapons of the war, the incredible dam-busting bouncing bomb. This is one of the original prototypes for Barnes-Wallis's famous bouncing bombs, which took part in the Dam Busters raids. The final bombs didn't really look like that at all. They looked more like oil drums. But it took a lot of experimentation to get to that shape, and a lot of the original trials took place just around the corner. Barnes-Wallis needed a place with long stretches of open water to test his bouncing bombs. But it also had to be shallow enough so these prototypes could be easily retrieved. The Fleet was ideal, and for a few months in 1942 and early 1943, his team came here for the first ever tests of their novel weapon.
And he told us afterwards that they'd actually put a bullet right through his saucepan.
Local residents Dick Daly and Bob Payne were just boys at the time. So which direction did the planes come?
They came from that direction,
Yeah.
and they went right the way down, about half a mile down, when they released their bomb.
You can see why they would have dropped them here. Perfect place for a bouncing bomb.
Yes, yeah.
Did you have any idea what it was that was going on?
No, the only thing that we possibly thought it could be was that it was a type of mine that was going to be bounce off the water and hit the side of a ship.
Now, you're only a little lad, but did you ever meet Barnes-Wallis or any of his people?
Well, yeah, I met one of his team. Yeah, he came in lodged with us.
How did you get on with him?
Very well, he helped me with my homework. I used to get 10 out of 10 when he helped me.
And after he left?
Oh, I was lucky to get 3 out of 10.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, that today this is a lovely haven for waterfowl and seabirds, and yet one of the most important experiments of the Second World War was taking place here. And you were just staring at it as kids, not having a clue what was going on.
No idea.
Barnes Wallis' extraordinary invention saw action in the famous dam buster raids of May 1943, which seriously undermined the industrial power of the German war machine. And the seeds of his success were sown here, in the waters of the fleet. But that's jumping ahead in my story. For now, I take the path up away from the fleet, heading east. Come on, don't dawdle. So, we're around about here, and I'm going to go all the way along there, down there, about 3 miles I think, into Langton Herring. It's what's known as a doubly thankful village, which means that all the men who left here to fight in World War I and in World War II survived. So if you're looking for a memorial commemorating Langton Herring's war dead, you won't find one. And extraordinarily, there are just 14 villages in the whole country that can make that claim to fame. That's where I'm heading. That's Portland with Weymouth round the corner. And can you see there's a line of clouds just over there? I reckon that's a front, and I'm not convinced that I'll get to Weymouth without getting drenched. In the summer of 1940, the people of Dorset had a lot more to worry about than dodgy weather. Just across the water, on Sunday the 30th of June, the Nazis invaded the Channel Islands. On the very same day, German bombers launched some of the first attacks on Britain. And if I'd been in Weymouth that fateful Sunday back in 1940, I wouldn't have been looking for a hotel for the night. I'd have been looking for shelter from German bombs. I'm on the second day of my journey, discovering how World War II played out along what is today a rather wet Dorset coast. Today, 12 miles in, I've reached the towns of Weymouth and Portland. They sit either side of a huge harbour, and in 1940 it was home to one of the Royal Navy's biggest south coast bases. Overlooking the harbour on the Weymouth side, Knowth Fort was originally built in Victorian times, when the threat came from the French, not the Germans. Now it's a museum, but it doesn't take long to realise it played a crucial role in World War II as well. I don't think this is Victorian, do you? And there are other examples of the very hasty refurb that they did over there and over there. In early 1940, Knowth Fort was rigged with anti-aircraft guns and searchlights, because now the coastal defences had to cope with the threat of attack from the air as well as the sea. It's a pretty chunky piece of equipment, isn't it? Hang on, I'll just get a bit closer to it. Shouldn't really do this. They've actually had searchlights here since the year 1910, although that one was put in very swiftly in 1940 by the British company General Electric. I'm sure it worked much better than its predecessor, but I wonder if one of the reasons for swapping it was because the previous one was made by Siemens of Germany. The defences at Knowth Fort would soon be tested in action. Within days of the fall of France, Hitler's attention was focused across the Channel to Britain. The strategically important Portland harbour was a prime target. It was home to a significant number of Britain's warships, but it was vulnerable. And on June the 30th, 1940, German bombers attacked. It was to be just the first of a series of raids designed to cripple the Royal Navy ahead of a German seaborne invasion. I've come to Portland to meet someone who experienced those bombing raids at first hand. Hello, Poppy.
Hello.
Nice to see
Thank
you.
you.
You're going to show me where your house was?
Yes, yes.
And this was the street that you used to live in when you were a little
Yes,
girl?
it was, yes.
Poppy Butcher grew up here and has vivid memories of that summer of 1940. And this one's your house?
Yes, it's where I lived, yes. I was born there, the 11th of November 1928. I've got a picture of me taken outside the house.
Yeah. Wow. Must have been a great little street for people to play.
Yes, it was. It was
Kids.
lovely. Lots of children. We had great fun.
Do you remember when the bombs started falling?
Yes, I do, yes. It was on a Sunday on 30th of June 1940. It was the first air raid we had, and I think it was the first air raid in England. The planes came over and they flew very low, and they started dropping bombs. You could hear them whistling down. We all lay on the ground.
You must have been terrified.
Well, I think probably were, but it was exciting as well. So I think when you're younger, you know, you don't feel the fear of things.
Portland was bombed 5 more times in the following 2 weeks.
The following Thursday, on the 4th of July, there was a very heavy air raid in the dockyard. They bombed the Foyle Bank.
HMS Foyle Bank was a former merchant ship that had been fitted with anti-aircraft guns. She was deployed to protect the harbour from attack, an assignment that made her a prime target for incoming German aircraft. In the raid on the 4th of July 1940, the Foyle Bank was bombed and sank, with 72 casualties. And they weren't the only ones in the firing line. Poppy's father, a dock worker, was in the harbour that day.
They were building a tunnel to put the oil tanks, and when the siren went, they all ran into the tunnel, and then the all clear came, and they came out, and a lone plane came over and killed 14 of them. Sadly, my father was killed on that day.
Sad
Yes, yes, very sad.
One of the other casualties was sailor Jack Mantle, a gunner on board HMS Foyle Bank. His grave is in the Royal Navy Cemetery overlooking the harbour. And because of his bravery that day, he was one of the first servicemen in the war to be awarded the Victoria Cross. Possibly not the nicest section of this walk, but even on a rubbish day like today, still a pretty amazing view from the top. Jack Mantle was 23 when the attack happened, and is laid to rest alongside some of his colleagues from the ship. There's somebody off the Foyle Bank there, and one there, Foyle Bank. So many of them. This is it. J.F. Mantle, Jack Mantle, VC, he won the Victoria Cross, and this is his citation. Leading seaman Jack Mantle was in charge of the starboard pom-pom gun when HMS Foyle Bank was attacked by enemy aircraft on the 4th of July 1940. Early in the action, his left leg was shattered by a bomb, but he stood fast at his gun and went on firing. Between his bursts of fire, he had time to reflect on the grievous injuries of which he was soon to die. But his great courage bore him up till the end of the fight, when he fell by the gun he had so valiantly served. And he was 23 years of age. As I leave Weymouth, the sun has finally broken through. And I can for a moment imagine how the darkness lifted from the lives of the people here in September 1940. The Germans had repeatedly bombed the area that July and August, but then in late summer they switched their attention to big cities like London. Weymouth was spared. And today, as I leave the surprisingly intact Georgian streets behind, I can appreciate a different kind of air display. Can you see that flock of terns? They're fishing in there, and every time one gets one, flies over the other side of the road with one in its mouth. There's a bird reserve over there, and presumably feeds its chicks. It's lovely. Really nice. I've another 4 miles to go, around the bay to Osmington Mills, where there's rather a good pub. But it's time to enjoy the countryside, and I can make a good pace under the clear skies, which is good. Because the next stage of my journey is going to be very different. I'll be going underground in search of mysterious hidden bunkers. But that's for the morning. It's the third day of my quest for the hidden remnants of the Second World War along the Dorset coast, and I've just over 6 miles to do today. As you can see, I've ordered the full English. I never know whether that's a good idea when you're walking because it means you're burning the calories slowly all day, or whether it's stupid because it just makes you slow and sluggish, but we'll find out, won't we? Oh, and by the way, the weather forecast couldn't be worse. My route will take me over the hills to Ringstead Bay, where I'm going to find out how this area played its part at the height of the Battle of Britain. Then a wonderful stretch of coast before my next overnight stop in Lulworth Cove. As soon as I leave the pub, it's clear the forecast was about right. The coastal path here is quite a challenge to the walker, so it's just as well that this morning I need to keep my eyes on the ground, where I'm looking for traces of cutting-edge wartime technology. It's a bit unusual, isn't it? A great square of concrete in the middle of the path. It's got to be World War II, isn't it, overlooking the sea there? It's the first sign that I've entered a part of the coast absolutely crucial to the defence of Britain in 1940. I've met up with pilot and historian Graham Matthews.
We had a very large radar station here, which we're walking up towards one of the bunkers now. But the part that you just passed, that probably would have been the receiver aerial base. There were a couple of very large masts there, around about 240 feet high, with some bunkers hidden in the woods, and also some other ancillary buildings to do with the equipment.
Radar uses bursts of high-frequency radio waves transmitted from a mast to detect aircraft. The signal bounced back to receiver stations allows operators to work out the aircraft's height, speed and direction.
It was developed just before the war. The RAF needed some form of system to give early warning of any approaching German bombers or fighters. It was used very effectively during the Battle of Britain.
Between July and September 1940, the Luftwaffe and RAF fought for air supremacy over southern England. The Germans needed control of the skies if they were going to invade, so the whole future of the war hung in the balance. Radar gave the Brits a fighting chance, and the western end of the detection network was based on the Dorset coast. So where is it that you're taking me?
Just up here, about another couple of 100 metres,
Yeah.
we've got one of the transmitter bunkers, which is still intact.
The transmitter bunkers were key parts of the radar chain. And although it's difficult to find, the one here at Ringsted is still open to the public. Cool, it is big, isn't it?
So we have to remember, 70 years ago when the war was on, we didn't have computers and small microchips. We're dealing with valves and big units, and that's basically, we needed a space to put all that equipment in.
The equipment needed for this primitive but vital technology was so large, there would only have been room for 4 operators in here at the most. And is that a ventilation shaft or something?
Yeah, because you've got to remember, when the RAF personnel were in here working, this would have been a sealed environment.
Yeah. During the Battle of Britain, stations like this were frantically feeding back information on enemy plane movements to Fighter Command. Thanks to their work, RAF fighters broke up repeated German attacks. And on September the 15th, 1940, they claimed an incredible 185 Luftwaffe planes. It proved a turning point. The Nazis shelved their plans to invade, and Britain could breathe again. Back in 1940, radar masts would have been dotted all along the coast from Dorset to the Orkneys. This cutting-edge technology would continue to play its part as the Allies turned their energies from defence to attack. But for the moment I can take a break from the war, and luckily for me, the sun's come out to light up one of the most impressive parts of my walk. That's Durdle Door down there. It's an enormous sea arch that's been created as the limestone's eroded over millions of years. But that's a weird name, isn't it, Durdle Door? The door's pretty straightforward, D-O-O-R, but the durdle is probably from an ancient Saxon word meaning open. So it just means open door. Durdle Door isn't the only geological highlight along this stretch. The horseshoe shape of Lulworth Cove just over the hill has been created over millions of years, as the sea has eroded the hard rocks at the mouth of the cave much more slowly than the softer ones behind. And the erosion has revealed a form of buckled rock strata so unique, it's got a name of its own. That's Lulworth Cove down there, and you see that stratification? That is called Lulworth Crumple. Sounds like a very nice Dorset cake to me. Maybe that's because being here brings back happy memories of childhood holidays. We always used to come here when I was a kid with my mum and dad, and there was always the flask of tea, of course, and the packet of biscuits. And it was always a sunny day, wasn't it? I think I'll take my memories to bed. Lulworth feels like a good place to stop for the night. Ahead of me tomorrow is some of the most dangerous land in Britain. It's another wet summer's morning as I head off. And what's more, it doesn't take long before I find my route blocked. I'm in one of the loveliest parts of the country, and suddenly there's all these signs saying, danger, danger, go away, or basically we'll blow you up. I'm on the edge of the Lulworth firing ranges, one of the few spots in Britain where the army trains with live ammunition. Hello, David.
Hello, welcome to Lulworth.
Thank you very much, thank you. Fortunately, David Willey, curator of the nearby Tank Museum at Bovington, is here to guide me through. The ranges are only open to the public on specific days, generally at the weekend, and I've had to get special permission to walk through today. What are these yellow markers?
Well, the idea here is that the range wardens come along and they keep an area clear on the paths.
Yes.
So after they've been firing, they check all the time to make sure there's no ordnance lying around, no empty shell cases, no unexploded bombs.
Although all sorts of weapons are used here, the ranges were developed for one in particular.
This is a training area for tanks. If you look into the distance, you can see the gunnery school. They train the guys there to fire the guns, and up on the ridge there you can see there's some concrete pads. That's where they park the tanks up and they fire down the valley towards targets just below the cliff here. And the idea there is if they miss the target, the rounds go in the hill, or if they hit the target and they bounce off, they go into the sea. The guns are so powerful, they actually have a 12-mile exclusion zone out to sea.
Incredible. It may not be immediately obvious that the ranges have a long history, but tanks were a key weapon on the battlefields of the Second World War. And by 1943, these ranges were jam-packed with vehicles and soldiers preparing for the invasion of France.
Everyone's down here training ready for the D-Day landings. Lots of armoured soldiers here at Lulworth firing the guns. And of course, Arrestor Dorset is basically an armed encampment. You've got lots of units here under canvas or in wooden huts waiting for June of 1944.
Today, the ranges are littered with relatively modern armoured vehicles, which are used for target practice. And amazingly, if you know what you're looking for, there's also evidence of a military culture from thousands of years ago. Is that what I think it is?
Yeah, this is the edge of an Iron Age hill fort here. We've just walked through the ramparts, and there at the end, built on the edge of it, a Second World War observation post.
Yeah, it's bizarre, isn't it? Once human beings decide that somewhere is a good defensive outpost, it can stay like that for millennia.
Absolutely.
Reminders of World War II continue to litter my route, and I'm heading to St Aldhelm's Head to see one in particular. This headland owes its name to a Saxon Bishop of Sherborne, and it boasts a really unusual Norman church. I'm not much of a one for cathedrals and great big churches. Too often they seem to me to be overblown, like great big ideological look-at-me statements in the landscape. But this little chapel to St Aldhelm is the complete opposite. It's 800 years old, it's beautiful architecture, very delicate, dignified, I think. But that's not what I've come here to see. Just along from the church is another structure. This one dedicated to some of the backroom heroes of the Second World War. This monument is dedicated to the men and women who worked so hard during the dark days of World War II to push radar technology to its limits. And by so doing, they gave us the edge over the Germans and ultimately helped us to win the war. It's rather nice, isn't it? The monument's here because the nearby village of Worth-Matravers was home to a top-secret radar research station during the war. They squashed the chicken then. 95-year-old Dr. Bill Penley is one of the few scientists who worked there who's still alive today. Bill, what was your involvement in the development of radar? Cheers, thanks a lot.
We were based here at Worth-Matravers near the CH station, which was the end of the chain of radar stations which had been erected before the start of the war, and I was put straight away onto the transmitter development side because my PhD was a good lead-in to designing transmitters for radar.
What improvements were made to radar while you were here?
I was involved in developing the chain home low, CHL stations, to detect low-flying aircraft that came in under the detection level of the main stations.
Was it here that they developed that circular thing with the beam and the blips?
That development of what's called the Plan Position Indicator, or PPI, which is what people think of as radar these days, was actually first tried down here. And I had the job of fixing up this radar in order to put the signals into this equipment so that it could be displayed on the tube.
The research station at Worth employed 2,000 people, and their innovations included specialised radar units for use in night fighter aircraft, a development that ensured Allied air supremacy 24/7.
It was an amazing thing for a young chap like myself to come down with a team where we had top priority, and whatever we said we wanted, we could have, really. It was absolutely amazing.
How significant to the war effort was the work that was done here?
I think without radar, we'd have lost the war almost straight away.
But we didn't, and the war ground on. Until by 1944, the Nazis were at last losing. Dorset would have its part to play in the invasion that would bring about their final defeat. That's what I'll be investigating tomorrow. I'm on the final leg of my 60-mile walk across Dorset. From Worth Matravers, I'm cutting across the Isle of Purbeck to reach Studland Bay. In the spring of 1944, the long, flat beaches of this bay played a key role as the Allies were preparing to invade Nazi-occupied France. D-Day was looming. And the evidence of Studland's wartime role remains open to the public even today. Well, I've seen a few pillboxes along the way, but this one's the mother of them all. But it's not just the size that's so striking, it's so long and narrow. I can't imagine a gun being sighted here. So what was it for? Hey, John.
Hello.
Good to see you, mate. Hopefully, World War II historian John Pearson can fill me in. That is a bizarre-looking thing, isn't it? It looks like a huge concrete mouth organ.
It's an observation point that was built specifically so that you could watch rehearsals for D-Day in the bay here. High-ranking officers would watch, and also VIPs. On one occasion, there was Churchill, King George VI, Eisenhower and Montgomery were all here on the same day.
Why is it steps like that?
That's for safety reasons, so that any shrapnel or bullets would actually be bounced off as opposed to being skidded into their vision slot.
So they were really protecting them, weren't they?
Oh yes, it's. I believe it's more than a yard thick, the concrete.
Can we have a look inside
Yes,
Fort
certainly.
Henry? I don't think I've ever seen a structure like this before. Huh. Extraordinary place, isn't it?
Yeah?
Just for the function of looking, nothing else, is it?
No, no, it's perfect view.
It is a great view. What Churchill, Eisenhower, King George and Montgomery came to see here was the biggest dress rehearsal for D-Day. Studland Bay was chosen for its similarity to the beaches of Normandy, and in April 1944, thousands of British troops landed here in Operation Smash, the largest of all the training exercises for the invasion. Of most interest to the visiting VIPs was the use of amphibious tanks. Specially designed for the invasion, they were regarded as vital if troops were to successfully fight their way off the beaches. But it was only now, just weeks before D-Day, that they were first ready to test them in a full-scale exercise.
A canvas screen is attached around the body of the tank, and that is held up by compressed air. and then the tank floats with the tank actually hanging below the water surface, and all you can see is a rim of canvas with a frame above the surface.
Sounds a very dangerous thing to do.
Well, I certainly wouldn't want to be involved in it myself.
In theory, the operation of amphibious tanks was straightforward, but in practice, the sea is unpredictable and accidents were bound to happen.
Well, on one of the exercises here, 6 tanks were sunk because of the bad weather, and 6 men drowned, and the stone here commemorates their loss.
You think that their sacrifice was quite significant, don't you?
Without the lessons from this exercise, D-Day could have been a disaster.
While these exercises taught troops how to sail tanks onto the Normandy beaches, the actual assault would still rely on infantry. And the nearby town of Swanage would host some of the men who would lead the attack on the beaches of France, the American 1st Division. My walk just happens to coincide with the return of the GIs. They've come back to mark a special occasion. The guest of honour is Wes Mullen. He was stationed here in the war, and 68 years later he's returned to unveil a plaque commemorating the strong ties between the GIs and the people of Swanage. Do you remember this spectacular view?
No. I remember the channel.
Yeah.
But we didn't pay attention as young kids. We did not pay attention around, and we should have.
You were here for how long?
9 months.
9 months, and you didn't notice the view?
No. We ate right in this building right here in front of us, and never thought about looking out the window.
Because you're an 18-year-old.
Yeah, I guess I was too dumb, too stupid or something to look out and see what was around me. Yeah.
So what were you doing?
We were here for the invasion.
Yeah.
We were here for that purpose, and we were supposed to be sort of in hiding. We were not to make too much noise, not to be seen too much, because they was trying to, I guess, trick the Germans into thinking we were going down further, down Calais, instead of here. And it apparently worked.
I love the way you say Calais. That's what we call Calais, isn't
Calais?
it?
I don't know. I'm close.
So what did you do?
We played cards a lot. We played cards. We went and walked into town often, in movies in town. We went to dances. We danced with all the girls, were very nice, all good-looking girls, but their mothers were sitting up in the balcony. And when the dance was over, we'd run for the door, the girls run for the door, but their mothers were there first.
During the first half of 1944, the American soldiers played and parted in Swanage, and the war must have seemed a million miles away. But then the partying stopped. Wes and his comrades were loaded onto boats, and on the 6th of June, D-Day itself, they landed on the most heavily defended of all the landing beaches, Omaha.
We landed about noontime. We were very fortunate. We drew straws who was going to go, and it was the 16th first, 18th, and then us, which we were the lucky ones.
Did that make much of a difference to the casualty rate?
Terrific, tremendous difference. The original regiment, 16th regiments, lost 90% of their men. The 18th went in and lost about 75%. And we went in, I don't know what the whole regiment lost. We didn't lose, as far as in combat, actually none.
The Americans on Omaha suffered around 2,000 casualties that day. and many of Wes's comrades would fall in the fierce fighting that followed.
Yeah, and maybe a month, 2 months later, most of the rest of these fellows were all killed.
You were incredibly lucky, weren't
I'm
you?
definitely, absolutely, and I say that's all it is.
We honour all the American soldiers who set out from Swanage, but who did not return.
The ceremony is a fitting end to my walk through Dorset's World War II history. I've seen how the 4 years between 1940 and 1944 have left an indelible mark on the landscape of this county. It's been a fascinating, intriguing, and at times deeply moving experience. And even though time has obscured some of that history, many people down here are determined to ensure it's not forgotten. These things work. And that's been my experience throughout this walk. Little groups of people illuminating parts of the story so that future generations will understand that a great war played out on these very beaches. If you want to follow in my footsteps, you can download a guide to my walk from www.channel4.com.
If you missed Tony's first history walk last week through the stunning Peak District where the Industrial Revolution was born, that's available now on 40D. OK, a change of pace next tonight. Going all out to track down his kidnapped daughter, Liam Neeson stars in the edgy thriller Taken.